Have you ever been fined just for buying a new blue car? What would you do if one day you bought a new car, parked it right in your own driveway, and still got fined for violating HOA regulations? That's exactly the situation I, a single man, had to face when I parked my brand new Tesla in my driveway. Before we dive into the story, tell me, where are you reading from? Leave a comment below. The neighborhood where I live is a luxurious gated community with smooth asphalt roads, neatly trimmed trees, and lush green lawns that never seem to have a single weed. Everything is so perfect it feels artificial, thanks to the iron fist of the hoe and in particular its president, Karen. Every house in this neighborhood looks so similar it's almost boring. Beige walls, white trimmed windows, gray tile roofs. The cars are no exception. If they're not black, they're silver. If they're not silver, they're white. I never cared much about these trivial rules until I became their target. That day, I woke up feeling excited. The deep blue Tesla Model S I had ordered had finally arrived after months of waiting. It wasn't just a car, it was a reward for years of hard work. I parked it neatly in my driveway, under the morning sun, and stepped inside to make myself a hot cup of coffee. But less than an hour later, when I stepped outside to admire my car a little more, I saw it, a bright orange violation notice stuck right on the windshield. Oh, violation. Color does not match neighborhood aesthetics. Fine. $500. I blinked, staring at the notice, hoping I had read it wrong. But no. Someone had clearly put it there, and I had a very strong suspicion about who. Before I could even get properly angry, a voice rang out right behind me. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk." I turned around, and just as I expected, Karen was standing there. She looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine for the rich and powerful. Neatly styled blonde hair, a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, and razor-sharp high heels clicking against the stone pavement. In her hands was a leather-bound folder as if she were about to sign an important contract, or, more realistically, issue orders. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore. I assume you've seen the notice," she said, tilting her chin toward the violation slip on my car. "I have." I held it up, and I can't believe my eyes. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson." She crossed her arms, offering a cold smile. "We have an approved vehicle color palette to ensure the neighborhood remains visually harmonious. Your car," she glanced at my Tesla as if it were a stain on a pristine white carpet, "clearly does not comply." I let out a bitter chuckle. "Are you telling me I've been fined because of my car's color?" "Precisely. What if I had bought a red car?" "Still not allowed." She shrugged. "Red is too flashy. It disrupts the aesthetic." I tightened my grip on the violation notice. "Are you saying I have to repaint my car to your liking just to park it in my own driveway?" She smiled, a smile full of condescension. "It's not my decision, it's the rules." I knew her. I had heard plenty about her tricks. Karen wasn't just a tyrant. She was a manipulator, always looking for ways to control everything within her sight. Anyone who dared to challenge her authority was crushed under the weight of rules, clauses, and absurd penalties. I wasn't one for confrontation, but this time, I knew I couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just about a violation notice. It was about the abuse of power. Karen didn't stop at slapping me with a violation. Soon, warning letters began appearing regularly in my mailbox, each one growing more hostile. At first, they were written in polite but firm language reminding me of the Homeowners Association, HOA regulations. But then, they became more threatening. One morning, as I stepped onto the porch to grab the newspaper, I found another letter lying on the doorstep. No envelope, no sign of official documentation, just a hastily folded piece of paper, the handwriting messy yet dripping with malice. "Mr. Thompson, if you do not comply with HOA regulations, we will have no choice but to tow your Tesla. This is your final warning." I clenched the paper in my fist, an uneasy feeling rising in my chest. This wasn't just a simple reminder, it was an ultimatum. Karen was no longer hiding her intentions. I glanced around the neighborhood. Though it was still early, I could feel a few eyes peeking from behind curtains. They knew. They always knew. But no one dared to stand up for me. That afternoon, as I was crouched in my garage checking the brakes on my BMW, Lisa, the neighbor next door, walked over. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression tight with anger. "Daniel, did you get the letter?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. I looked up, still holding the wrench. "I got it. Same old story." Lisa gritted her teeth, clearly angrier than I was. "You don't get it. This isn't just about your car. Karen is making an example out of you for the whole neighborhood. If she tows your car and you don't fight back, what's next? Who's next?" I set the wrench down and met Lisa's gaze. She was right. I had seen this happen too many times. Lisa herself had been one of Karen's victims. "Remember my rose bushes?" she continued, fury in her voice. "Just because I planted flowers in my front yard, the HOA fined me $500. They said the color wasn't in line with the community aesthetic. Bullshit. They just target whoever they don't like." I let out a dry chuckle. "They want to break us down, make us bow." Lisa nodded firmly. "Exactly. And if you don't do something, Karen will think she can keep crushing anyone who dares to challenge her authority." I tightened my fists, anger burning deep in my chest. I wasn't someone who sought out conflict. All I wanted was a peaceful life, to take care of my 2 daughters. But clearly, Karen wasn't going to leave me alone unless I fought back. I exhaled, looking at the crumpled letter in my hand. Then, I shoved it into my pocket, my expression hardening. "If she thinks I'm going to roll over like everyone else," I said slowly, my eyes locking onto Karen's grand estate at the end of the street, "then she's dead wrong." I knew Karen was someone who liked to flaunt her power. She didn't just manipulate the homeowners association, HOA. She also saw herself as an exception to every rule. That was clearly reflected in her gleaming silver Mercedes, something she was always so proud of. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. But after receiving a warning letter from the HOA for parking in front of my house for too long, I started noticing every little detail in the neighborhood. One evening, while taking a walk with Lisa, I noticed something strange. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing toward Karen's house. Lisa tilted her head. "See what?" "Karen's Mercedes is always parked right in front of her house," I said. "She's never been penalized, even though the HOA rules clearly prohibit overnight street parking." Lisa frowned. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." I nodded. "Every single night. I even saw the HOA tow the Jones car once just because they forgot to put it in the garage for one night." Lisa let out a soft chuckle. "Looks like the HOA has special rules for people like Karen, huh?" "Not really." I narrowed my eyes. If they can turn a blind eye for her, they can also be forced to acknowledge the truth. I decided to turn this into a little spectacle for the entire neighborhood. That night, Lisa and I took action. We brought along a giant roll of glittering red gift wrap, double-sided tape, and an oversized silver bow. I put on gloves and carefully wrapped layer after layer around the Mercedes. Lisa struggled to hold in her laughter as I skillfully secured the edges with tape. "Are you sure she won't notice?" Lisa whispered. "Karen never wakes up early," I smirked. "We have plenty of time." After about 30 minutes, the sleek car had transformed into a giant, shimmering gift box under the streetlights. I crouched down and placed a sign right in the middle of the hood. "Congratulations, Karen. The only person in the neighborhood who doesn't have to follow the HOA rules." Lisa stepped back to admire our work. "A true masterpiece." "Exactly," I chuckled. "Now let's head home. The real fun starts tomorrow." The next morning, just as I predicted, Karen's shrill scream echoed through the neighborhood. "Oh my God, what the hell is this?" Standing on my porch, I took a sip of my hot coffee, savoring my own performance. Karen stood frozen in front of her car, her face flushed red with rage. She yanked at the wrapping paper, but it clung too tightly, tearing in ragged patches instead of coming off cleanly. Neighbors began gathering. Some chuckled quietly, while others pulled out their phones to record. Mrs. Jefferson, one of the elderly residents, well known for being constantly harassed by the hoe, spoke up with a mocking tone. "Oh, I thought this was a special gift from the hoe just for her. She's always their favorite." A few people burst into laughter. A man holding a coffee mug whistled. "Morning entertainment, huh?" Karen spun around, her face twisted with anger. "Do you people think this is funny?" She pulled out her phone and immediately dialed Brian, the hoe lawyer. I could hear Karen's voice hissing through the receiver. "Brian, you have to do something. That bastard Daniel vandalized my car. I want to sue him right now." I raised an eyebrow and shrugged as if I had nothing to do with it. "Vandalized? I was just helping decorate it." Lisa stood next to me, trying to stifle her laughter, but unable to hide the amusement in her eyes. Before long, the whole meeting took place. Of course, its purpose was to deal with me. That evening, the community clubhouse was packed. A small sign placed at the entrance announced, "Emergency home meeting, mandatory attendance." Some residents stood in small groups, whispering among themselves, while others sat down with expressions of curiosity and tension. At the front, Karen stood tall in a dark blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, her face cold and commanding. Beside her was Brian, one of the hoe board members, who looked nervous as he flipped through a stack of documents in his hands. As I stepped into the room, I could feel the heavy atmosphere pressing down. A few residents gave me subtle nods, while others quickly avoided my gaze. I didn't blame them. Everyone knew the extent of Karen's influence in this community. Karen clapped 3 times, commanding the room's attention. "We are here today for one clear reason. A resident of this neighborhood has deliberately vandalized my personal property, blatantly violating hoe regulations." She abruptly turned toward me, her eyes flashing with fury. "Daniel Thompson, do you think you can get away with this?" The entire room fell silent. A few people cast worried glances in my direction. I remained calm, crossing my arms over my chest with a slight smirk. "I'm just wondering, why is it that hoe regulations seem so flexible? Some people get fined for the smallest infractions, while others can blatantly break the rules without consequence." Murmurs spread through the residence. Some turned to one another, whispering. I could see Karen struggling to maintain her composure, but the way her hand clenched the edge of the table betrayed her impatience. I hadn't come here empty-handed. I had prepared thoroughly, and last night, Lisa and I had worked tirelessly to gather undeniable evidence. I stood up, slowly opening my laptop and connecting it to the projector. "Before we get into general home matters, I think there are some things everyone should see first." The screen lit up. The first piece of evidence: the hoe had been excessively fining residents for minor infractions, things as trivial as mowing their lawn a few days late or parking slightly outside the lines, while Karen was consistently excused despite blatant violations. Surveillance footage showed her brand new Mercedes parked on the sidewalk for weeks without a single notice. A murmur spread through the crowd. Everyone knew how strict the hoe was, but now it was clear only regular residents were forced to comply, while the president was exempt. I continued. The second piece of evidence: suspicious expenditures from the hoe fund. I projected a series of bank statements onto the screen. Does everyone see this transaction? A dinner costing over $2,000 at a luxury restaurant, paid for with hoe funds. And this one, a 5-star resort getaway. Who here thinks this was for the benefit of the residents? The murmurs turned into outraged chatter. I looked at Karen. Her face began to lose its usual confidence. But the biggest blow was yet to come. I opened an email sent from the HOA account to a car dealership. Final payment confirmation for the white Mercedes. Transferred from the HOA fund. The remaining balance will be paid with Whitmore's personal card. The entire meeting room fell silent. Then came the outcry. She used home money to buy a car? Unbelievable. We've been deceived all this time. Karen shot up from her seat. This proves nothing. You're just making things up to smear me. But I remained calm. I think you'll want to hear this before you keep denying everything. I signaled, and a resident sitting in the back row stepped forward, a middle-aged man who looked nervous but determined. Whitmore, do you remember what you told Brian? He took out his phone and played a recording. Karen's voice rang out, cold and sharp. I don't care about the rules. I want him dealt with. If we don't keep control, the residents will start thinking they can do whatever they want. Silence swallowed the room. Then, anger erupted like a volcano. She abused her power. She's unfit to be HOA president. People like her belong in jail. Brian turned pale. He suddenly stood up, raising both hands as if surrendering. I was just following Whitmore's orders. I had no choice. Karen spun around, glaring at him. Traitor! But it was too late. A resident shouted, We need a vote right now. Fire Whitmore. The crowd roared in agreement. The HOA had no choice but to announce a full audit. Karen was forced to resign on the spot. As she walked out of the meeting room, she turned back, her eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won? I'll sue you for defamation. I'll be back. I folded my arms and replied calmly, I was hoping you'd say that. And trust me, you won't like how it ends. Because now, the entire neighborhood stood with me. Karen pressed her lips together and turned sharply away. Her high heels struck the floor hard, but they no longer carried the same authority as before. The door closed behind her, and the room erupted in cheers. The new vote was held that very evening. The HOA elected a new president, someone fair, someone who actually listened to the residents. People could finally live in peace, no longer afraid of manipulation or threats. Lisa approached me with a warm smile. So, it's over. How do you feel? I looked at her, then around the room, neighbors chatting happily, children running around without being unfairly scolded. I nodded. Honestly, what I learned wasn't just how to deal with Karen. I learned the power of unity. Without everyone speaking up, I probably wouldn't have been able to do anything. Lisa chuckled and playfully nudged my arm. One more thing, Daniel. You still owe me dinner. I laughed. I haven't forgotten. She gazed at me for a long moment, something in her eyes. Something more than just friendship. And I realized that maybe, between me and Lisa, there was still more to be written in the future. But one question remained unanswered. Would Karen come back? Honestly, I didn't care. Because no matter how many Karens appeared, the truth would always be the truth. Have you ever faced abuse of power? Share your story. Leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay tuned for more stories.